My name is Claire Whitfield. I was 34 years old when a debt collector called to ask why I was 3 months behind on rent for an apartment I had never lived in. I told him he had the wrong number. He read my full legal name back to me, my correct social security number, and an address in Charlotte, North Carolina, 200 miles from where I actually live. Then he told me the lease had been signed 14 months earlier. I hadn't signed a lease in 6 years. That phone call is where this story starts. But it isn't where it began. It began 4 years earlier, the week my younger sister Paige lost her apartment for the second time, and my mother called to ask me for just one favor. I want to tell you what that favor turned into, and what I found when I finally stopped assuming my family would never do something like this to me. I'm the oldest of 2. My sister Paige is 29 now. Growing up, the story in our house was always the same, told so often it stopped sounding like an opinion and started sounding like a fact. I was the responsible one, and Paige was still finding her way. I don't think anyone meant it as a warning, but that's what it became. Every time Paige needed something, money, a place to stay, someone to talk a landlord down, I was the name that came up first. Not because I offered, because it was assumed. 4 years ago, Paige called our mother in tears. She'd been evicted from her apartment after missing rent for 2 months. She needed a co-signer to get approved for a new place, and her credit wasn't good enough on its own. My mother called me that night. "It's just a co-sign," she said. "It's not like you're paying for anything. You're just putting your name down so she can get approved. Your sister needs this, Claire. Please." I want to be honest about something most people leave out of these stories. I didn't say no because I saw it coming. I said yes. I drove 2 hours to the leasing office, sat across from a property manager I'd never met, and signed my name under a line that said guarantor. Paige hugged me in the parking lot afterward. "I'm going to get it together," she said. "I promise this is the last time." I believed her. I had no reason not to. For the first year everything seemed fine. Paige paid her rent, or at least nobody called me, which I took as the same thing. I got busy with my own life. I'd just been promoted at the accounting firm I worked for. I was saving for a down payment on a condo, and Paige's apartment situation faded into the background the way most family favors do once they stop being urgent. Then about a year and a half in, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. A property management office, asking to confirm my income and employment for the file on record. I asked what file. They said the guarantor file for the lease I'd co-signed. I told them I already did this a year ago. There was a pause. "This is a new lease," the woman said. "Renewed 6 months ago. You're still listed as guarantor." Nobody had told me it had renewed. Nobody had asked. I called Paige that night and asked why I wasn't told. She laughed it off. "It's just a renewal, Claire, it's not a big deal. Same apartment, same terms." I didn't think I needed to call you every time. I let it go. That's the part one keep coming back to now. I let it go because the alternative was starting a fight over paperwork, and in my family starting a fight over paperwork with Paige always somehow turned into me being the difficult one. Over the next 2 years, small things kept happening that I explained away individually, but that look very different laid end to end. A collections notice for a utility account in Charlotte in my name that I called and disputed. Paige told me it was definitely a mix-up, and I believed her because why wouldn't I? A hard inquiry on my credit report for a store credit card I never opened at a furniture store in Charlotte. When I asked Paige about it, she said her friend must have used my information by accident while helping her furnish the new place. I didn't push. I should have pushed. A voicemail from an apartment complex, a different one in a different building than the one I'd originally co-signed for, asking me to confirm my employment for the file. I called back to correct them, was told the request had come from account records associated with my social security number, and was told someone would follow up. Nobody did. I assumed it had been resolved. Every one of these on its own sounds like something you'd shrug off. That was the problem. Nothing ever looked big enough by itself to justify the conversation I would have needed to have. Before I tell you what the debt collector's phone call actually uncovered, I want to ask you something because I think it matters more than people admit. Has anyone in your family ever used your trust as a shortcut? Used your name, your credit, your yes from years ago, without ever asking again? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, and I think you'll recognize a lot of what's coming. The debt collector's call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk at work. He asked for me by full name, confirmed my social, and told me I was 91 days delinquent on a residential lease in Charlotte, Current balance owed, $4,200. I told him calmly that I had never lived in Charlotte and had no lease there. He said the account was flagged under a guarantor agreement. Original signature dated 4 years earlier, my name listed as primary guarantor, address of record listed as my sister's. 4 years earlier. The original apartment. Not a new lease. The same one I thought had simply ended when Paige eventually moved out 2 years ago, because that's what she told me. She told me almost 2 years ago now that she'd moved into a new place with a roommate and the old lease was closed out, nothing to worry about. It was never closed out. It had been renewed twice more, each time under my name as guarantor without my knowledge, and at some point in the last several months, Paige had stopped paying rent on it entirely. I asked the debt collector to send me everything in writing. Then I hung up and I sat at my desk for a long time before I could make myself call my sister. Paige picked up on the fourth ring. I didn't ease into it. I told her exactly what I'd been told. The balance, the dates, the fact that the original lease had apparently never actually ended. There was a long silence. Then, okay, don't freak out. I can explain. Explain. I kept the apartment as like a backup. In case things with the new place didn't work out. I was going to catch up on it, I just got behind and I didn't want to bother you with it because I knew you'd be upset. You kept paying rent on an apartment I'm the guarantor for and you didn't tell me and then you stopped paying it and you still didn't tell me. I was handling it. You weren't handling it. I got a call from a collections agency, Paige. This is on my credit now. This is my name. God, Claire, it's $4,000. You act like I robbed a bank. I said I'd handle it. I asked her, directly, whether she understood that $4,000 in collections under my name could affect my ability to get approved for the condo mortgage I'd been saving toward for 2 years. She was quiet for a second and then she said something I've replayed more times than I can count. Maybe don't buy a condo right now then. You'll figure it out. You always do. You always do. That was the whole relationship condensed into 4 words. I didn't yell. I didn't cry, not yet. I did what I do, I got organized. I requested a full copy of my credit report from all 3 bureaus. I called the original leasing office and requested every document with my signature on file, going back to the original cosign 4 years earlier. I requested the renewal paperwork for both subsequent renewals. What came back over the next week changed the entire shape of the story. The first renewal 18 months in, the one where the leasing office had called me to confirm income, had my signature on it. I hadn't signed it. I compared it letter by letter to my actual signature on my driver's license and on the original lease. It was close. Close enough to pass a glance. Not close enough to survive a real comparison. The second renewal, filed roughly 6 months before my call with the debt collector. The one Paige claimed didn't exist, the one she said the apartment had been closed out before, also had my forged signature on it. I called Paige's old roommate, someone I'd met exactly twice, hoping she might know something. She was surprisingly willing to talk. She told me Paige had asked her more than once to grab the mail from the old apartment complex and forward anything that looked official to a P.O. box, because Paige didn't want her sister finding out she was behind again. There was not a mistake. Not something Paige had been handling. A system built specifically to keep me from finding out for over a year. I called my mother not for comfort, but because I needed her to understand what I now knew before Paige had the chance to tell her version first. My mother's first reaction was almost identical to Paige's. I'm sure she didn't mean for it to get this far. She's under so much stress right now, Claire. Can't you just pay it off and we'll figure out the rest as a family? She forged my signature, Mom. Twice. Are you sure it's forged? Maybe she just signed for you because you were busy and she didn't want to bother you. I asked my mother, plainly, whether she believed it was acceptable for someone to sign another adult's name on a binding financial document without permission, regardless of the reason. She didn't answer that question. She said instead, I just don't want this to tear the family apart. That sentence told me everything about what would happen if I let this go quietly. It wouldn't be the last time. It would just be the last time I found out about it by accident. I gave Paige 1 week to pay the outstanding balance directly and to sign a written statement acknowledging what she'd done, so I could get my name removed from any future obligation and clear my credit record. I told her clearly, if she didn't, I would file a police report for identity-related fraud and pursue it through the leasing company's legal channels. She called me back within the hour, furious. You'd actually do that? To your own sister? Over an apartment. It's not about the apartment. It's about you signing my name on documents without my permission. I only did it because I knew you'd say no if I asked. That was, I think, the first fully honest sentence she'd said to me in 4 years. She hadn't forged my name because she was desperate and out of options. She'd forged it because she'd already decided in advance that my consent wasn't necessary, because it had never really been necessary before. I'd always eventually said yes or absorbed the cost quietly, or let it go to keep the peace. She wasn't lying to avoid a fight. She was skipping a step she'd learned over years that she didn't actually need. She didn't pay it. She didn't sign anything. Instead, she told our mother I was threatening to have her arrested, and by the end of that week, my father had called to tell me I was blowing this out of proportion, and that family doesn't call the police on family. I asked him one question. If a stranger had used my name and forged my signature to open a rental account and left me holding $4,000 of debt, would he consider that a crime? He didn't answer. He changed the subject to how upset it was making my mother. I filed the police report. I submitted the forged documents, the credit report showing the fraudulent inquiries, and a written timeline to both the leasing company's fraud department and to the credit bureaus, disputing the accounts under identity misuse. The leasing company's investigation moved faster than I expected, mostly because the forged signatures were an easy comparison against documents already on file. Within 3 weeks, the debt was formally reclassified as fraudulent rather than delinquent, which meant it came off my credit report, and the company opened its own claim against Paige directly for the unpaid balance, plus damages tied to the false renewals. Paige was served with paperwork at her new apartment. She called me not to apologize, but to ask if I could explain to them that it wasn't that serious. I told her I couldn't do that because it was that serious, and because I had spent the last 3 weeks discovering exactly how serious it had already become before I even knew about it. While going through the credit report line by line with a fraud specialist, I found something I hadn't been looking for. Second account. A store credit card. The same furniture store account from 2 years earlier, the one Paige had explained away as her friend's mistake. It hadn't been a mistake. It had a $900 balance opened in my name at the address in Charlotte, and it had gone to collections 8 months ago. I had genuinely believed because Paige told me directly and confidently that it had been resolved. 2 forged documents. 1 entirely fraudulent account I'd been told didn't exist. All under my name, all traced back to the same 4-year window that started with a favor I said yes to in a parking lot. I added it all to the police report as a supplemental filing. The fraud specialist told me matter-of-factly that patterns like this, small, repeated, explained away individually, are exactly why family-related identity fraud so rarely gets reported. Each incident is designed, whether consciously or not, to be too small to justify the fight that reporting it would require. My parents asked to meet in person as a family, at their house. Paige was there when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen table with her arms crossed, already positioned like a person expecting to be attacked. My mother started. We just want to find a way to move forward from this without it becoming this huge legal thing. It already is a legal thing, I said. It became a legal thing the day she forged my name on a lease renewal. Paige spoke without looking at me. You're really going to let this ruin my life over an apartment I don't even live in anymore. You forged my signature. Twice. And opened a credit account in my name that you told me directly was resolved when it wasn't. I was going to pay it back. When? She didn't answer that. My father tried a different approach. Claire, you make good money. This wouldn't have even been a hardship for you to just cover, and none of this would have happened. I looked at him for a moment before I answered. That's the actual problem. Not that I couldn't afford to cover it. That covering it was always assumed to be an option nobody needed to ask me about. My mother said quietly, we just always thought you were the strong one. You never seemed to need anything. I didn't need anything, I said. I needed to be asked. Nobody had an answer for that. Paige finally looked up. So what, you want me to go to jail? Is that what fixes this for you? I want you to take responsibility for what you did instead of asking me to absorb it quietly the way I have for 4 years. Paige didn't go to jail. The fraud claim was resolved through a civil settlement, She was required to repay the leasing company directly for the outstanding balance and damages, and separately to reimburse the credit card debt, both under a legally binding repayment agreement that no longer touched my name or my credit at all. The furniture store account and the apartment debt were both formally cleared from my report within 2 months. My mortgage approval, which had been at risk while the fraudulent debt sat on my credit report, went through 6 weeks later than I'd originally planned. I closed on the condo in the spring. Paige and I don't talk often now. She sent one message months later that read, "I know you think I don't get it, but I do. I just didn't think it counted as a big deal at the time." I didn't respond to that message. Not because I was still angry, but because I'd stopped needing her to understand it in order to move forward. My parents' relationship with both of us shifted too. My father months later admitted, quietly almost as an aside, that he hadn't realized how many times over the years I'd quietly absorbed a cost so that a conversation didn't have to happen. My mother still occasionally frames it as the whole misunderstanding, but she stopped asking me to smooth things over with Paige, which for her was its own kind of admission. I used to think being the responsible one in a family was a compliment. I've since learned it's often just a label people use to justify never asking your permission before spending your name, your credit, or your time. If someone in your life has ever used the fact that you're the reliable one as a reason they didn't need to ask, that's not a compliment either. That's a system, and systems only change when someone stops absorbing the cost quietly enough for everyone else to keep pretending it isn't happening. I didn't keep every piece of paperwork because I expected my sister to betray me. I kept it because somewhere along the way I stopped assuming I'd never need to prove what actually happened. That instinct is the only reason any of this got fixed. If this happened in your family, keeping the paperwork isn't paranoia. It's the only language some people will eventually have to listen to. I never raised my voice through any of it. I didn't have to. The folder did the talking. That's revenge without voice. This video is a work of fiction. All names, characters, and events depicted are fictional and created for entertainment and reflective purposes. Any resemblance to real persons or events is coincidental.